Coming up next on The Walk, the difference between a promise and a covenant.
We're also going to be examining the documentary hypothesis.
And the planets and their purpose.
They're coming at you, that and more. Coming up next on The Walk. Stay there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Rod Hembree.
I'm Corie.
And I'm Ryan.
And this is a television program that takes you through the Bible in 1 year. Today, we continue in the book of Genesis. Now, I am curious as to what kind of archaeological things you can bring up when we're dealing with the first ages of the earth.
Actually, there's a surprising quantity of issues to talk about, but today we're going to be focusing a little bit more on a scriptural side, and we're examining the documentary hypothesis and seeing if there's any credence to that theory, and we're also going to answer some questions that commonly come up when talking about Moses.
All right. Now, the documentary hypothesis basically talks about several people putting together the book of Genesis and various
Exodus,
tribes.
Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Exactly.
Yes.
The Pentateuch, which is the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Very interesting. And they're going to be experts after watching your piece.
Well, as much as can happen in 3 minutes.
Very good.
So.
Now, you owe us an explanation from last week.
Yes, you do.
So what are you doing? Are you going to explain yourself?
Yes, I am. Well, this is part 2 to the journey through our solar system. Today we're going to be looking at Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto.
All right. This is the extremities.
By the way, there might be more planets, but,
you know what I think?
There might be more planets that we haven't discovered yet.
Personally, we talked about this. I think the asteroid belt used to be a planet.
I do too.
Making it 10.
I'm going to be doing a segment on that coming up in the future. So
I think
there's
2 more we haven't found for 12 planets because God does 12 designs in 12 tribes, 12 elders.
Could be.
Hey, here's what we're going to be talking about today on the program. If you're following along the Bible guide, the earth from heaven's perspective, specifically speaking about the promises of God and how they're viewed as the promises from God. In other words, what I'm talking about is the covenant. And did you know even in nature, there's covenants. God said the sun and the moon are for a sign of the seasons. Well, today, he makes promises to Abraham, but Abraham learned something about the covenants God has with man, but also what God thinks about the human soul as opposed to a piece of rock floating out in space. All of this and more coming up as we study Genesis chapter 23 and 24. It's going to be very interesting. Let's study on. The Bible is not simply a religious document, but a family of man historical document. It is the oldest living text we have in today's world. The original notes for the creation story were passed through the family of Adam, and then all the way to Noah, finally to Moses. And the information in the Bible is over 4,000 years old, but it was carefully cared for and copied in full public view throughout the centuries. Join Janice, Corie, and Rod Hembree live every Sunday night at 8:30 p.m. for the Bible Investigators program. We take your questions from Facebook, from Twitter, and also from the chat room about God, the Bible, and the church. Study for truth with God's Word, Sunday nights live at Bible Investigators. That's BibleDiscoveryTV.com, 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Bible Investigators. Join us.
Today we are continuing to read through the book of Genesis. Now, the book of Genesis is actually one book out of a group of 5 books that we call the Torah or the Pentateuch, and it's just the first 5 books of the Bible that claim to have been written by Moses. And if you do a little bit of research on that claim, you find that there's substantial evidence for the fact that Moses actually wrote these books. But there is this theory that is commonly taught in colleges and universities, and I want us to take a closer look at it. It's called the documentary hypothesis.
There is a way of thinking in biblical criticism that says the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, must have been written much later in history by several men, each in possession of differing and incomplete records of Hebrew tradition and history. This is because, the critics say, there are many instances in which biblical stories are told twice or more, and often with contradictions in them or differing details. For example, the story of creation, of Jacob's success under his father-in-law Laban, of the great flood, and the story of Joseph. These critics are thorough when it comes to dissecting and analyzing the surface of the text, but they seem to be completely missing the big picture. The Bible is ancient literature that was written by a different culture in a different time. One has to approach it taking into account the known styles of that culture and history. And there are indeed well-known, established characteristics of ancient literature. Easiest to spot is repetition. In order to set in the reader's memory events and their importance, literature is known to repeat whole incidences to provide details and emphasis. Also, parallelism, the act of saying one thing 2 different ways. It seems that in their attempt to explain the Bible away, many critics have not even given it a chance to speak.
Putting Genesis 23 and 24 into context in our Truth Text segment, we are talking about Abraham moving south and departing from the terror of Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction. Abraham encounters the traditions of the land and the culture. He is a man who lives in fear, protecting his family and his estate. And so he lies about his wife and nearly causes an international incident. Chapter 21 reports the birth of Isaac and the promised son. Chapter 22 is the great test of faith for Abraham. Would he give all blessings that God had given him back to God? We'll find out.
Then Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, the sons of Heth. And he spoke with them, saying, "If it is your wish that I bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and meet with Ephron the son of Zohar for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me at the full price, as property for a burial place among you." Now Ephron dwelt among the sons of Heth, and Ephron, the Hittite, answered Abraham in the presence of the sons of Heth, all who entered at the gates of his city, saying, "No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field and the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I give it to you. Bury your dead." Then Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land, and he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, "If you will give it, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there." And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, "My lord, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? So bury your dead." And Abraham listened to Ephron, And Abraham weighed out the silver for Ephron, which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, currency of the merchants. Genesis chapter 23, verses 7 through 16.
You know, as we study the book of Genesis, I don't believe that there is anything in the Bible that is not significant. I believe that everything is significant. Now, I want to read to you what we've read here from Genesis 23, the first verse. Sarah lived, this is Abraham's wife, 127 years, and these were the years of the life of Sarah. Now, Sarah, of course, was given the gifted child. She tried to make a family on her own through Hagar. It didn't work. But God made her family for her. So then all I have to do is go to Psalm chapter 127, the exact amount of years that Sarah lived, and I read something very important. Unless the Lord builds the house, they that labor, labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. Keep in mind that Abraham has come from the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, that all of this is tied in together, and there is such design in the Bible. It is absolutely stunning. But you know, there are three words to the wise, one from chapter 23 and one from chapter 20, or two from chapter 24 that we're going to look at. Before we get to the first word of the wise, let me remind you, Abraham is learning about God. He's learning that we serve a covenant God. But the other thing that Abraham is learning is that he can negotiate for God's favor, as he tried to do in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Very interesting. But now Sarah dies, and Abraham understands the value that God places on life. But he also understands that it's not the same as property. And this is one of the covenants that we're going to talk about. Abraham learns about biblical covenants. We have a biblical God if we study God seriously. And that's really our first word to the wise. Here it is. Biblical values dictate that the worth of a living soul should never be connected to money. Now, I want you to notice that in this sequence, where Abraham buys the cave of Machpelah for his dead, he is willing to assign money to it. But when someone is alive, it is priceless. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment, because we live in a world in which all of our worth seems to be assigned to how much we can make in our lifetime, especially in an economy like ours. God was teaching Abraham and had taught Abraham the value of life. As a matter of fact, because Isaac was given to Abraham and Sarah, he realized that life doesn't come except by the will and the purpose of God. Now, that's a staggering thought in today's world, where life seems to be more and more nothing but a commodity, a can of Coke to be drunk and then used up. And this biblical value system is completely different than the biblical values of this world. But you know, as we move to chapter 24, we also learn something else that's very interesting, and there are many that we can focus on. We talked about biblical values. Well, covenants. Covenants of marriage should always be backed with spiritual covenants before God. Abraham makes this decision. He's got to receive a wife. He must get a wife for his son. He realizes how important that particular covenant is. And so he makes a covenant with his senior servant, and many scholars believe that's Eliezer, but it doesn't really say. And he says, I want you to take this seriously and make sure that my wife, or the wife for my son, is chosen by God. Again, here we see a biblical value system very different than what the world has made marriage today. Marriage is a sacred covenant between husband and wife and God. And God is the one, His name on your marriage, that's the name that has all the power to it. But once again, our world today in neo-society has made marriage nothing more than a political instrument, or a tax reason, or some idea that's romantic and lovey-dovey and feely and gooey. But the truth is that the covenant marriage is so important to God. Marriage covenant is defined by the Bible, not by the state. Very, very important for us to consider. As we move on in chapter 24 in this very interesting scene, the servant goes to get a wife for Isaac. The covenants of marriage always calls us to follow God's calling and not each other. You know, in chapter 24, and it's really interesting, this whole sequence that comes up, the servant prays. And he says, now, Lord, I need to find a wife for my master's son. And so help me. So he does. God shows him. So the covenant of marriage always calls us to follow God's calling, not each other. What he says, first of all, 2 points to be made here, is that Abraham says, I want you to go get a wife for my son in the country in which I came, and not here, because God is against the pagan ideas. I need someone who is not, someone of my own family, who is not dissuaded by all of these other gods. And so he follows the original covenant that God gives him. In doing so, the servant says, I've got to find someone. God answers the prayer of the servant supernaturally. And do you want to know something? When we allow God to be our matchmaker and not eHarmony and not our own ideas, then God always makes the perfect match. And God always has the perfect purpose for our life. So once again, here's the biblical covenant of giving our life to God and allowing Him to put us in the right relationships. Strange but true. Places, people. Ancient scribes record amazing truth. Ancient scribes record amazing truth. There are 10 names representing 10 generations from the first man, Adam. Adam means man. Seth means appointed. Enoch means mortal. Kenan means sorrow. Malhalal means the blessed of God. Jared means shall come down. Enoch means teaching. And Methuselah means his death shall bring. Lamech means the despairing. And Noah means rest and comfort. Put the meaning of these names all together in the order they're given in the Bible, and it reads, man is appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed of God shall come down teaching, and his death shall bring the despairing rest and comfort.
Program, we took a look at the claims of the documentary hypothesis, which simply claims that the books of Moses, Genesis through Deuteronomy, were written by several different authors, and they were more of a compilation. Well, you and I took a look at those claims, but there are many questions that come up when you talk about the authorship of the Torah, of the Pentateuch. And those questions can sometimes be very difficult to answer because they are such ancient books. However, in just a second, I'm going to attempt to answer some of these questions for you.
Many critics of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, have claimed that the Pentateuch is inconsistent. The Pentateuch clearly refers to Moses as its author, as do the historical traditions of the Jewish people. But the critics say that this cannot be, because these books of the Bible refer to Moses in the third person. They claim that if he was writing them, he would use a first-person account, such as, then I spoke, instead of, then Moses spoke. There is also a record of Moses' death at the very end of Deuteronomy, which critics claim to be proof that Moses did not author the books. But what does an examination of history tell us? First, we know from other records that it was quite common for kings or leaders to dictate to a scribe, or to commission a scribe to write a specific document for them. So a possible explanation is that Moses dictated to a scribe, who wrote of Moses in the third person. Though, it does need to be mentioned that it would not be unreasonable for Moses himself to have chosen to write in the third person. There are several known ancient documents in which the author does just that. As for the death record of Moses, it seems that Joshua, who took over leadership of Israel after Moses, either wrote this epilogue himself or simply had it written by someone else.
Quick Study TV presents Good Friends Fellowship Sunday services with the teaching of the Word, great worship, and fellowship in the chat room. You're invited to join Pastor Rod and Janice online at Good Friends Fellowship every Sunday. Services begin at 11 a.m. Eastern at www.BibleDiscoveryTV.com. Remember to follow the links to Good Friends Church services. Now, we are learning a lot about theology as we go through the Bible. We want to invite you to join us. We have the Quick Study Pocket Guide available to you. We need your help. Our viewership supported. Now, let me show you on the screen what our addresses are. If you would like to get a hold of the Quick Study Pocket Guide, you can write to us. Let me give you those two addresses. When you write to us, please consider your best offering and make sure you ask for that guide you see on the screen there, the Quick Study Pocket Guide. As we go through the Bible, there'll be one for every month. We'll automatically set it up for you. Now, here's the address. In the United States, write to P.O. Box 150, Murraysville, Pennsylvania, 156680150. You can call Barb or Carrie at 724-733-8336. In Canada, you can write to P.O. Box 456, Orangeville, Ontario, L9W5G2. The number is 519-940-8338. Michelle or Beth would be happy to talk to you there. Remember to write for your Quick Study Pocket Guide, and also, may I ask, please, that you would consider an offering to help us stay on the air. Also, I want to remind you that you can reach us on Facebook and or YouTube if you search Rod for TV on YouTube. Also, you can make donations and get in contact with us by going to the website at the top of the screen, BibleDiscoveryTV.com. That's BibleDiscoveryTV.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the long and anticipated answer to the questions, what are the planets for?
That's right.
So we're going to learn now?
We're going to learn now. It's coming up.
We're
taking a look at the remaining planets and their purpose.
All right, here we go. Cosmic Mysteries.
Our solar system is made up of 9 planets that rotate around the sun. We know the Earth was made for life, but what about the other known planets? Is the Earth unique? Last time we ended our journey with Jupiter. Continuing our journey, we come to Saturn. Like Jupiter, it is also a gas giant. Its atmosphere is comprised of poisonous gases. Beyond Saturn lies Uranus. This planet is similar to Jupiter and Saturn in that its atmosphere is thousands of miles deep of poison gases. After Uranus comes Neptune. Neptune has a very thick atmosphere made of blue gases. These gas giants leave us with the mystery of what's beneath, but even if there is a surface to walk on, it is unstable for life. The most distant planet from the Sun is Pluto. Pluto has hardly any atmosphere at all. It is so cold that it has snowstorms of solid methane crystals. Methane freezes at minus 259 degrees Fahrenheit. If the Earth was as cold as this planet, then all the gases in the atmosphere would be frozen solid. Clearly, these planets cannot support life. And since these planets cannot support life, then what is their purpose? The Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 18, that they are timekeepers. It says, quote, "Then God said, 'Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens, to give light on the earth.' And it was so. He made the stars also." God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness." Close quote. The word stars in the scripture also means planets. In the 1790s, the French atheist Laplace also discovered that the planets act together to stabilize the solar system. But if for nothing else, God created the planets for his pleasure. Revelation 4:11 says, "You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created."
Nothing is wasted in creation, in God's design. So you've discovered that the planets are, actually the solar system's a gigantic clock,
That's right, according to Genesis 1.
which of course is the beginning, and now we're looking in Revelation, the clock starts falling apart because there'll be a new heaven, that's interesting.
That's right.
It is.
It was also shown that the planets are actually stabilized, the solar system. That was found out by the French atheist Laplace.
So an atheist who doesn't believe in God figured out that was discovered the handiwork of God. That's almost like our buddy. Remember our buddy Voltaire who said Christianity would be dead, and 100 years later his house is being used as an International Bible Society printing press. It's a good
That's
one.
right, yeah.
All right, Corie, we do a program, and it is called Bible Investigators. Tell us about it. You got like 10 seconds.
Well, every Sunday night we're here and we answer viewer questions live on Sunday nights at 8:30.
So join us.
If you've been listening to this program today and feel a tug, a pulling towards something bigger beyond yourself and your own ideas, that most likely is the call of God on your life. We encourage you to respond. God says in His Word that He will never present His Word without calling men and women to come to Him today. If you want to respond to God, we invite you to pray this prayer in your heart as we lead you. Simply pray, "God, I ask your forgiveness for my sin, and I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I need you now. I believe you died on the cross for my sin and rose again on the third day, and I decide to follow you." If you prayed that prayer, we encourage you to continue seeking God, your Lord, and keep watching as we study His Word to you.